それでは本日最初の講演、なぜ日本企業の海外拠点が狙われるのか。日本サイバーディフェンスシニアエグゼクティブアドバイザー、那波様、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。那波さん、Thank you very much for joining today.
では私から約5分の時間ですが、なぜ日本企業の海外拠点が狙われるのか、経験ベースに皆さんにお伝えしたいと思います。これはコロナ禍ではありませんが、三菱電機さん、それから5月には NCD コミュニケーションさん、それから6月には本田技研工業さんが海外拠点、こちらの方がやられてしまったというのが報道されました。ただ、この他にも約2桁、私、あるいは私のチームがこの海外拠点で発生した不正アクセス、これに対する対処支援を行ってきました。その経験の中で得られた知見を皆さんと共有させていただきます。私のスライドはこの1枚だけなんですが、この赤文字で書いているところがとても重要です。これは基本的なサイバーセキュリティ対策、あるいは情報セキュリティ対策として、非常に基本的なものかもしれませんが、すべての海外拠点で行っているとは言い難いところがありました。特にこの中で皆さんにお伝えしないといけないと思っているのが、右の方に書いています2つのキーワードです。1つは攻撃表面の縮小ルール。これはマイクロソフト社が Windows の OS 向けに提供しているものなんですが、簡単に言うと、サイバー攻撃の特性を理解している人であれば、必然的に設定すべきところ、これがセットで実は機能として組み込まれています。これはマルウェアを阻止するインテリジェンスルールというものがありまして、これを設定、まとめて、あるいは行為のシーケンスをいずれか、あるいは全部止めるという観点ですね。で、これを実はやっていなかったというところが非常に多いです。もちろんこれは Windows の機能を使っていなかっただけでなく、これを補完するような様々な設定、それからプロダクト、サービスがかなりあります。このような基本的なところが抜けていた。これが実は攻撃者がシンプルな攻撃プロセスで短時間で展開できるというところを許してしまうことになります。で、2つ目はサイバー衛生、サイバーハイジーンと言います。こちらはコンピューターやその他のデバイスのユーザーがシステムの正常性を維持し、そしてオンラインのセキュリティを向上させるために行う慣習文化です。日本ではよく対策という言葉が使われますが、これはカウンターメジャーですね。現在求められているのは、攻撃のプロセスを止める、したがってステップという言い方がふさわしいというふうに言われています。このようなステップ、この順番、あるいは組み合わせを合理的に行うという観点で、なおかつ人間の脆弱性に焦点を当てたものを包括に行うものがサイバー衛生です。これは公衆衛生の概念から来たと言われています。で、この概念を持っていないとですね、攻撃者の観点からすると、侵入及び内部展開が可能な経路や手法の選択肢が豊富にあるというふうに見立てます。かなり抽象的なことをお伝えしましたが、私からお伝えすべきというところは、これまでテクニカルな対応にある意味変調した日本特有の対策、この裏を書いた攻撃が非常に多くなっている。それを対策する大きな教訓として私どもの方で得ているのは、この2つのキーワードでございました。大変短い話ですが、私からは以上でございます。
那波さん、どうもありがとうございました。それでは続けて、NCSC ドゥギー・グラント氏の講演に移りたいと思います。ドゥギー・グラント氏は、NCSC 英国サイバーセキュリティセンターにて、シニアローエンフォースメントコーディネーターとしてご活躍です。
Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm the Senior Law Enforcement Coordinator and Senior Incident Coordinator within the National Cyber Security Centre in the UK, but we work globally supporting other countries' response to significant cyber incidents. I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk to you, and I'm going to break this presentation into 3 sections. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you around the threat and the changing threat and the cyber security landscape. Then I'm going to show you some slides. I'm going to talk through the response to some of the cyber incidents that we're seeing at the moment. And lastly, I would like to just discuss with you some of the recent incidents that we have responded to in the UK and globally with our partners internationally. So first of all, before I show the slides, I would just like to talk about the changing landscape in the cybersecurity landscape. So we're all aware of the traditional attack vectors, as we call them, the phishing attacks, the hacking through remote desktop protocols or through ports vulnerabilities. And they haven't changed. They are still the attack vectors that we're seeing. But when we look at the motivation, we talk about hostile nation states, we talk about the cyber criminals, we talk about the hacktivists and also insiders. And they have not changed either. The motivations of these groups continue to target our business and industry globally. But things have changed slightly over the past number of months, especially since the COVID pandemic hit us globally. And what we saw in 6 months ago and 8 months ago, we saw governments being targeted. We saw certain financial sector and other industries targeted by these hostile nation states and also by cyber criminal groups. When the pandemic hit, our lives changed, our working methods changed. We did a lot more working from home, and remote working, and we let our guard down in some areas, but our focus changed, certainly in the UK, to supporting the health sector, supporting our pharmaceutical industry, and supporting all the agencies that were responding to the COVID pandemic. The criminals and hostile state actors changed their methods as well, and they targeted these groups and they used lures to try and trick us because we were wanting information. We saw an email coming in with the latest COVID update. We saw emails coming in from our organisation telling us about how we're going to change our working practices. We had our supply chain and our colleagues in other organisations contacting us, telling us about the updates of how they were working. And we clicked on links, we opened emails, and we let our guard down. And that was devastating for some industry within the UK, especially within the health sector. And currently within the health sector, the National Cybersecurity Centre, which I will tell you more about shortly in the slide presentation, we are now monitoring over 1 million IP addresses for the health sector, defending tens of thousands of attacks every day. The criminals and the hostile states are targeting those industries for financial gain, but also for intellectual property. And many of you will have seen the latest attribution we made to Russia, who attacked our vaccine and virology research in order to try and gain an advantage over the vaccine work that was ongoing. But other sectors have been targeted now. We have seen in the last number of weeks, education sector have been heavily targeted. We have seen universities being targeted. And why is that happening? Well, it actually appears now that the criminals, the cyber criminals, are watching the media and news. And as we talk about the return to school and our children going back into school and the universities accepting students again, and the exam results coming back in the UK for our students who've been studying, the criminals have targeted those organisations because they can steal intellectual property, data, and also extort those companies if it's a ransomware deployment. And I'm going to touch more about ransomware shortly, but I know there's another presentation on ransomware further on in this series of seminars. So it's a very interesting topic, but we are seeing media targeting by cyber criminal groups, which is of great concern to us at the moment. And a lot of our work in the National Cybersecurity Centre is supporting these sectors and trying to anticipate where the next attacks are coming onto which sector. But retail have been targeted now, the finance sector have been targeted in the last few weeks, education have been heavily targeted. We've lost in one geographical part of the UK, 13 colleges and schools in one county area targeted with attacks, devastating attacks that have basically ceased their operations. So let's look in a bit more detail just around the NCSE and what we can do to prevent and deal with some of these attacks. So we are in a changing cyber landscape and we are in a continuing threat at the moment. But how are the NCSE responding and who actually are the NCSE? Well, many may have heard of the National Cybersecurity Centre before, But the National Cybersecurity Centre is split into 6 main operation directorates, and it's good to understand what they are because it will help with the presentation. First of all, we have incident management, and I'll talk more about incident management shortly, but we respond to hundreds of attacks, significant attacks against the UK every year, and that's not only government, it also includes industry, supply chain, finance sector, education, and everything else I've touched on so far. We have our Threat Operations Directorate, who watch and monitor hostile nation states and cyber criminal groups that take the intelligence, because the National Cybersecurity Centre is an intelligence agency within the UK, and they try and defend against some of these attacks. We have our communications and media team that promote awareness and advisories and share information with business and industry. We have our assessment team that look at the threats as they're arising and try and put advisories out in threat assessments so we can tailor our response to these threats. We have our capability team that produce advice for business and industry on how to, for example, in this slide on how to do logging effectively to make sure if you have an incident that you can examine and analyse your logs effectively. And lastly, our engagement teams that work with particular sectors in the UK to make sure that they are prepared for the next wave of attacks that will undoubtedly come. We work very closely with industry, and we have an Industry 100 team. We embed 100 members of industry within the National Cybersecurity Centre, and they work alongside us in gaining intelligence and information about some of the threats. We have cyber incident response, or CIR companies, that we accredit who are capable of responding to live cyber incidents. And we work with other organisations such as Nihon Cyber Defence to make sure that we can respond effectively to incidents, either preparing for them, monitoring against their impact, or responding to the incidents. We promote advisories, such as this advisory against Advanced Persistent Threat 10 or APT10, a hostile nation state group who attacks certain sectors within the UK and also globally. We have a cyber information sharing partnership. This is a portal, an online secure portal, where we share information, and NCD are members of CISP now and can receive the latest information that we promote to try and reduce the threat of attacks. We also have sectorial information sharing exchanges where we share information with organisations to reduce the impact of attacks. We have a national incident categorization matrix, and I'm showing this to you in confidence because we don't actually make this public, and I know it's a very small font and you might not be able to read the detail, but that is designed that way. But every instance that we have in the UK, we measure on a scale of C1, a national cyber emergency, all the way down to a C6, which is an attack against a member of the public in our country, and everything in between, from large organisations, small organisations, and industry and government. Depending on the scale of the incident, that will tailor our response. And if you have a C3 or C2 incident, you will receive dedicated support through the National Cybersecurity Centre and our law enforcement partners. What sort of incidents are we detecting in this? Well, we detect many incidents. Now, this is an analysis of the past 18 months. And we saw from the nearly 1,000 incidents that we experienced last year that the majority, over half, were through actual hacking or network intrusion. About a quarter were malware deployments, and about another 20% were through social engineering attacks, which includes insider threats as well. This is very interesting for us because actually malware seems to be a major threat at the moment and continues to be a major threat and impact, but actually hacking has been increasing of late, and that's for various reasons which I'll touch on shortly. So what's new for the attackers? Now, this is a bit of a technical slide which I'm going to show you for those of you that are more in the technical awareness of cybersecurity. But there are a number of attacks that come to the fore at the moment, and we talk about implants and remote access Trojans being a threat, a new threat that's emerging. We talk about fileless malware that can run without detection on your systems and reside in the memory and will disappear when the system is switched off. We talk But log bins and hacking of Unix boxes is a new thing because we never saw that happening before. But actually this isn't correct, because these are really old types of attack. They go back to 1998, 2001, and about 40 years ago when I was born. But these are not new. The new attacks that we're seeing at the moment are actually old tactics that have been redeployed at the moment. So there's nothing new that we need to be scared of, but we have to prepare for the attacks as they're emerging, because they are continuing to come around. This is a very complex slide. I'm not asking you to understand or to talk through this, but this is a cybercrime group. And you see the victims on the left and all the layers of cyber criminals who are involved in all the different aspects of cyber criminality. And historically, in the past, they wanted to attack our online banking systems. They wanted to acquire our customer payment details. And they wanted our intellectual property, or the things that are most important in our organisation. These continue to be the main threats that we're seeing at the moment, but actually one threat has come in that has overcome all these threats. That is going to be the NCD seminar that's coming up in the next few weeks, and you're going to hear more from Mr. John Noble about those, my very esteemed colleague. But what I do want to highlight is the response to any form of cyber incident, be it an intellectual property motivated hack, be it a breach of your network to retain financial details, or be it a ransomware incident. And there are four main parts that we always say we must do, but they come under planning. We must plan for the inevitable incident when it is going to happen. The first part is understanding that threat, understanding where the threat is coming from, understanding what our most important assets are and who may be after those assets, about preparing the plan for when the incident happens, about making sure we have effective backups and we know who to contact, and we have partners such as NCD and other responders who can help us prepare for these incidents and monitor our networks and make sure we are as prepared as we can be. And I'll come back to a point on that. Then we need to identify and resolve the incident. And this is probably one of the most challenging, about rebuilding our systems, making sure we can actively get back online. And I will touch on this when I talk about some of the examples that we have had in the past. And lastly, it's to report and review. Now, reporting is very important, and certainly in the UK, we encourage organisations that reside in the UK, as well as international colleagues who are operating in the UK, to report incidents to us. And we have had reports from Japanese industry and from other organisations in the past number of months. Many of you will be aware of some of those incidents, but we are continuing to support these organisations. And lastly, it's to review what's happened and learn from the incident. But this goes back to planning for the next incident, which unfortunately is going to come. When I talked about preparing, I said there was one aspect I wanted to focus on, and that was exercising. And NCSE have prepared what we call Exercise in a Box. And we currently have 12 scenarios in this Exercise in a Box programme that we deliver to organisations right around the world. And you can see from this heat map, the green countries are those countries that are currently using the NCSE Exercise in a Box. It is available to cyber professionals, large industry, small enterprise, medium enterprise, and the 12 scenarios range from very sophisticated attacks through to home working, and it will teach organisations of how to prepare for potential incidents or potential attacks. It is extremely successful, but we have found that exercising is a key part of preparing for the attacks as they come. So I just wanted to talk about one example of how we can respond to incidents. And that's been very important for us. And I'm just going to stop this presentation so I can talk to you again. We have had many incidents reported to us over the past year, nearly 1,000 significant incidents. And I want to touch just briefly on one incident, and I'm not going to name the company because that wouldn't be appropriate, but they have given me permission to talk about what happened to this organisation. It's a good example of how we need to prepare. So this organisation was a global organisation. They had part of the organisation, part of their infrastructure was based in the UK. And the Chief Information Security Officer relayed the story to me of how one day he was travelling on business from the UK into Europe. He travelled to the Netherlands and was in a taxi just about to arrive at the office when he first received a phone call from his security operations centre to say, we have a problem. And when he got into the office and started looking at the problem was escalating, and it appeared there had been a network intrusion in part of their infrastructure, a hack on part of their infrastructure. Not that day, not that previous week, but actually 6 months previously. And the actors had been on their network for 6 months, stealing their data, looking at their network, understanding their business, and deciding when to launch the final attack. And they did on that day. And they launched a ransomware attack, and it devastated the global infrastructure. They lost thousands of endpoints, they lost hundreds of servers, and the average downtime for ransomware attack is in the region of 16 days for a medium enterprise, as we're finding at the moment. The Chief Information Security Officer contacted the National Cybersecurity Centre. He contacted law enforcement and the National Crime Agency, and we engaged with our international partners right across Europe and right across the world, into the Far East, into the US and South America as well. It took 107 days to resolve that incident, and this business could not operate for 107 days and had to build their entire infrastructure. The current estimates of the cost of the attack are estimated to be in the region of $150 million US. That was a huge impact for the company. But what the Chief Information Security Officer said to me afterwards, and we did some presentations to some key stakeholders, he says, we did not prepare. We did not expect the attack, and we didn't prepare for the attack. And when the attack actually happened, we didn't know what to do. And that is why it took 107 days to recover, because they were not ready for the attack. They hadn't done that planning and exercising phase. So I'm not going to go into any more detail around that attack, but what I do want to say is that that organisation now are in a constant exercising programme, and it's easy for me to say now, but that attack actually came initially through a very new member of staff, a junior employee, who had gone into a new building in the UK and had opened one email and clicked on one link. And from that one click, it devastated the entire organisation. But the principles and the security planning was not in place for them to be able to respond effectively. We have had other incidents where it's been the Chief Executive Officer and the CEO has clicked the link, and sometimes we find Chief Executive Officers think they're immune from cyber attacks and they will never click the link. So one thing I would say is we have to prepare everyone in the organisation, from the newest junior member of staff right up to the Chief Executive and the senior command team. We must make sure we're ready for the attack, and this is a board agenda item that we must make sure that organisations recognise. I'm going to finish for now, but I'm happy to take any questions or give one final comment if that is appropriate. I'll just see if there's any questions at the moment.
Thank you very much, Dougie. Now we will move on to the Q&A session with Dougie. ラウンドテーブルの登壇者の皆様にも、ここからご質問に参加していただきます。最後のドゥギーさんの方から今ケーススタディとして実際にあった事例で、ランサムウェアに感染してしまって、グローバル企業であってイギリスでオペレーションにある拠点も感染してしまったと。でこれによって約107日間のダウンタイムが発生して巨額のコストがかかってしまったというケースをご紹介いたしました。でこちらでですね、ドゥギーさんは本当にただ従業員が1人がクリックしてしまったことによって始まってしまったというふうにお話をいただいたんですけれども、この1人の従業員が悪いのでしょうかというような質問をさせていただきました。
It's a very good question, and it's one I've been asked before, and the answer is no. We should not punish any individual for clicking a link. Any of us could do it, and I could do it tonight or tomorrow morning. My esteemed colleague, Dr. Ian Levy, our technical director in the National Cybersecurity Centre, recently wrote a blog explaining how he nearly fell victim to a phishing attack, and it was a malicious attack, but it was for humour purposes. It was for comedy that a blogger had emailed him to try and trick him into clicking it. and he nearly fell victim to clicking that link. So no, we should not punish individuals. We should train, we should make everyone aware, and we should have systems in place to minimize the impact of it. But what we should do is promote early reporting. So if somebody has clicked a link that they then think it was suspicious, to report that as quickly as possible and not to be in fear of disciplinary or other punishment against them. So no, we should promote awareness and early reporting.
佐々木さん、お願いします。日本語、英語の順でお願いします。
聞こえてますかね。佐々木ですけども、ドゥギーさん、ありがとうございました。質問なんですけども、CISP っていうですね、情報共有のプラットフォームみたいなのがあったというのが、フライドの中でご紹介あったんですけども、それはUK ベースのその日本企業も参加可能なんでしょうか。英語でいきます。Dougie, thank you so much for your fantastic presentation today. So I have a question for you. So can the UK-based Japanese companies join the CISP mechanism?
Yes, we would support any organization who has UK infrastructure. So any international organization that has infrastructure based in the UK, we will support. So we have international organizations as members of CISP who are operating in the UK. And likewise, we respond to assist international organizations who have been attacked globally but have impact in the UK as part of their organization. So we do that on a frequent basis, and we engage with our international partners if we're responding to incidents and make sure that we can provide the most effective and best response to help that organization wherever they're headquartered in the world.
Thank you so much. So wait to bear good news for the attendees today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I see one question coming up on the Q&A from the participant. Says, Dougie, what do you believe is the biggest threat to the cyber landscape right now?
That is a very good question. There's so many ways I can answer that. I think one of the challenges we have at the moment is the move to home working and displaced working in organizations. And I think that's opened up new vulnerabilities that many organizations have tried to expand their home working capabilities so quickly that there are vulnerabilities contained within that we need to be aware of. And we know that hostile states and cyber criminal groups and hacktivist groups are exploiting those capabilities at the moment. It is one of the reasons we in the NCSE developed the working from home exercise to try and practice the response to incidents that occur working from home and through the technology that we're using today. But one of the challenges we've had is people bringing on new technology far too quickly without planning for the cybersecurity aspects regarding that.
Thank you, Dougie. Nawa-san, I think he has a question. Nawa-san, お願いします。
はい、まず日本語から質問させていただきます。最近日本企業がさまざまなサイバー攻撃を受けているんですが、報道では、中国からとか、またロシアからということは抽象的な表現になります。そこでイギリスの観点から中国とロシアのこういうの違いについて、もしご知見があればいただきたいと思います。I'd like to ask in English. Dougie, thank you very much for informative speech. It's very excellent, I think. And recently, Japanese enterprise get experience of cyber attack from various kind of companies, and that the Japanese media, some of the cyber attack from the Russia or China. From view of UK, what do you think the difference from the Russia and China on cyber attack methodology, process, and their aim?
So yes, I'm going to answer that question, and it's a very good question. We have been very open in the UK about some of the motivations of hostile nation states, be that North Korea, be that China, Iran, or Russia. But there are different motivations that we talk about, and certainly Russia seek to provide more intelligence, information, and disruptive attacks against the UK, looking for information such as I talked about and such as we have talked about in the media about trying to acquire vaccine and virology technology advantage. China frequently target information and intellectual property. and they target organizations in the UK and globally to acquire that commercial advantage. And then North Korea, we see a lot of financial attacks, and we have attributed a lot of global financial attacks and breaches of financial institutions to North Korea as well. And Iran is a very political consideration that motivations will change depending on the political landscape at the time.
Thank you very much. That knowledge helps the Japanese enterprise. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。では最後の質問を私の方から仕掛けたいと思います。Dougie, thank you very much for joining today. And I have the final question, one sentence answer question. What do you recommend the audience to act on tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I said, make sure that preparing for a cyber attack is on the board agenda and that you're engaged with partners to help you in that support should the attack happen and preparing for that attack. Engage with your board and engage with your partners to make sure you're ready.
Thank you very much for joining today, Dougie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.